Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Seitu Jamel Hart, and I'm actually very, very excited to be here and to be moderating how to make the most of your monthly donor program. It is something in my own personal work that I've had both highs and lows of figuring out how to do that in small and big shops. And I'm more excited by this esteemed panel that we have. I've had an opportunity either over the phone, via email, or just to, as a quick reminder, hanging out and going to some of their events to get to know some of these panelists. So we're gonna, before I introduce the panel or allow them to introduce themselves, I like to do what I call my little polling questions. You all are going to be my co-moderators and their co-panelists. So sometimes during these things, especially when you get the one that's like before the last one, people are tired or right after lunch. So if you have questions, just go to the mic, I'll see you, and we'll call on you even while they're interacting. That way we can fill out the room, that kind of thing. They're all great, they won't mind. We talked about that in advance. And who's in the room? Sometimes both the moderator and the panelists ahead of time, it's good to know who is in this room. So how many directors of development, marketing directors of developments do we have in the room? Okay. How many marketeers do we have in the room that interface and help build out the collaterals for monthly giving programs and things like that? Okay. How many data people or technology folk are in the room helping us to make sure that all the information gets sent out? And how many people's organization, how many folks in the room, your organizations already have a monthly giving program? Oh, how many people are trying to start a monthly giving program? Everybody's hand should be up. That will be what sustains your organization in the long term. I think, is that a good sense? Do you all have a good sense of who's in the room? Okay, so let's get started. The first person who I will introduce is Robert Winnigates. Did I say that, Robert, correctly? Robert is the product director for Every Action. And then we also, sitting next to him, we have Nancy T. Olecki, who is the Director of Development and Communications for Urban Pathways. And then we have Tim O'Leary, Managing Partner and CEO of Next Generation Fundraising. And last but certainly not least, we have Professor Dr. Sally H. Cuffey of the Social and Behavioral Science Department at Medgar Evers College, CUNY. So what I would like to do is just to get started with maybe a quick minute overview where you all kind of just give the audience a quick overview of what your day-to-day work entails.
Don't start with me. No. Robert, go ahead.
Okay, sure. It'll be me. Why not? Hey everyone, so I work at Every Action. We're a nonprofit tool set, and so I spend my day talking to you lovely folks to understand the problems that you face and seeing what I can do to help make technology work better for you so you all can do more good in your lives.
Hi, my name is Nancy Olecki. I've been in development communications for almost a decade. Marketing has always been my passion, as events, and I've been very fortunate for the past several years to create marketing campaigns for nonprofits so that they could start looking at themselves and start acting like for-profits.
Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Tim O'Leary, CEO of Next Generation Fundraising. Thanks for having me here. At NextGen, we are a boutique consulting agency, and we provide strategy, creative, analytics, and direct response fundraising services exclusively for the nonprofit sector. And we're really passionate about helping organizations engage and connect with their donors and strengthening the relationships that they have. And so that's why I think this topic is perfect for that. So.
Hello, my name is Dr. Sally Cuffey, and I guess I represent an anomaly in that many people are so represented on the panel and on other panels probably are directly connected to the nonprofit community in various ways. primarily, I am a professor, but I also have a nonprofit, and it's called the National Clergy and Laywomen Humanitarian Foundation. Well, the interesting thing about this nonprofit and what I bring to the table is that women clergy are developing nonprofits. There's a trend in that specific area. And in that I'm also in the religious community as clergy, I found myself also doing the very thing that I was researching what clergy women were doing specifically nationally as well as in the Brooklyn community. So I represent that on this panel and hope to talk more about that particular development and trend.
Great, thank you all. So my first question is actually going to go to Robert because Robert, I feel like yesterday was Super Tuesday, and I know that you are a veteran of the Obama great, well done fundraising campaign, and so your work at Every Action has been very successful with working with clients to combine fundraising, advocacy, and technology to enhance their monthly donor programs. Can you specifically speak to some of the ways you all have used technology to support strengthening nonprofits' monthly donor programs? And Nancy said something that I thought, just as she was in her intro, more also along the lines of connecting more to for-profit in a way. Not saying that nonprofits need to be like for-profits, I am not saying that, but some of the strategies align with that, and much along how smart political action campaigns have been in that, to kind of begin to think about how they've touched more so than even monthly, but sometimes daily.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually I think the comparison between nonprofits and for-profits actually can be very apt. And so in the nonprofit and political world, I talk a lot about the concept of the ladder of engagement. And so you want to start with the end goal in mind, and everybody wants to sustain a program. That's how you can budget, that's how you know that you're going to exist in a year, because these are people who have made a monthly commitment to say, I'm going to chip in because I believe in your mission. And so this ladder of engagement is all about trying to get people to take successive asks of value to your organization. It could start as easy as just liking a post on your Facebook page, but then liking your Facebook page beyond that is a subsequent ask, and then beyond that it's subscribing to your email list, and then beyond that it's, hey, will you sign my petition about puppies? Who doesn't love puppies, right? Like, it's all about trying to get them into a pattern of taking action with your organization, and I'll talk about the tools that kind of bring into this as well. But in the vein of comparing the nonprofit ladder of engagement, it's a lot like a marketing funnel, right? And so if you're in the for-profit world, they talk about trying to get people into the top of the funnel with like really interesting content, and then the middle of the funnel where like you try to get them to sign up for a demo, and the bottom of the funnel is where like, okay, fine, maybe that's where they're trying to actually like purchase whatever it is that you're going for. And so it's the same concept, it's inverted because obviously you climb a ladder of engagement or you go down the funnel, but you know, it's the same idea of trying to get people in the door to understand what your organization is about, and then trying to build up their engagement with you and your relationship with them. So as far as like technology for that, something that I really like to focus on with nonprofit clients is the concept of an email series. And so there are two email series that I see as being really important for nonprofits. The first is for a new subscriber, right? So somebody signs up for your email list, you want to introduce them to what your organization is. I've heard this a lot today. Don't be humble, like don't let the work speak for itself. That's not gonna happen. Like you have to be able to talk really well about all the great work that you guys do every day. And so have a series of emails that are automated that come out from your system and say, okay, well, you know, hi, I'm the executive director. You know, this is some of the stuff that we've done. Oh, hi, I'm the development director. You'll be hearing from us when we have a big mission coming up. Or, hi, I'm the, you know, communications director. You'll hear about us when we have like a really great news story. That helps the supporter understand who you are, and you can try to, through that email series, work them up to, you know, sign that petition, and hopefully at the end of that, maybe even become a donor. And once somebody becomes a first-time donor, you can then have a second email series that kicks in that says, okay, great, now that you're a one-time donor, here's what we can talk to you about, give you our story, tell you how your contribution is making a difference for us, and that's how you can try to basically give them the reason to convert from that one-time donation into the monthly recurring donation. So that's the way that I look at things, and I realized that was probably a pretty long answer to your very beginning question.
No, I think that's fine. I said if you go stand up by the microphone, but you don't have to since you're in the middle. I'm joking.
I can repeat the questions too.
Go ahead. It's the afternoon.
Really quick, just a response, because I'm director of communications at a big settlement house in the city of Eastern.
Which settlement?
Dr. Russo.
Oh, I love Goddard. Stefan Russo. I used to work at UNH, sorry.
So at any rate, we're doing all this in time, but here's the pushback we get.
Sure.
I really drink the Kool-Aid on this, I believe this, but then we hear donor fatigue. You're emailing us too much, sending us too much. There are these two different ways of talking about you need to communicate more with your donor. It doesn't always have to be an ask. You need to communicate more. We even get the feedback, maybe not so many emails, maybe not. So what is your answer on
Sure.
that? There must be, I don't know if there is a formula.
Nancy, you
I just wanted to intervene. How are you receiving that sort of feedback? Are you receiving
Please stop.
please stop or unsubscribes?
And I don't know if we should just ignore them and think they're all grumpy and let's just stay with people who are happy with us.
Usually they're typically the minority of your feedback.
But I still think I'm asking for
Absolutely.
a little respect.
Yeah. There are various options for that, and for those who didn't hear the question, what about donor fatigue? Is there such a thing as asking too much? I'm sure many people have over communication, sure. I come out of the political world where, ask until you get a yes and keep asking until you get a no. But political campaigns come and go every 2 years. Obviously, nonprofits, you're trying to get them to write you into their will, and like that you have to really establish that relationship.
I will add, we did time and action planning, what I call time and action planning. And so just as some feedback, and everybody is different. So we all experience donor fatigue. I was very big with my team on doing time and action planning and polling whoever cohorts of groups that we thought we may want to poll, so that we had a sampling and a best understanding of what we could do, what messages they would respond to and not, and what were those rates. And so the time and action planning grid that we kind of created, we knew for X cohort, let's say, the 20 to 35-year-olds who we knew we could tap into and did like receiving, we knew when to message them and kind of try to create a calendar. It wasn't always, and kind of try to track it from a data perspective, as opposed to us just sending out emails because, and this happens to everyone, because the ED wants you to get something out or the program person wants to get you something out. I was always the bad guy. And I was like, wait a minute, that just because you want it out doesn't mean that our donors or other people want to hear it. And so I'm going to now segue by saying that, because to Tim, who has this really, in Tim's work, Tim does a lot of work with a multi-channel as well, but also using data, and his company has a very interesting program called DIG that I think, in lieu of your, could you talk a little bit about DIG as well?
Sure, and this is what we call speed consulting in our business, right? Kind of to your question and to this larger topic, it depends on the organization, right? So, and it depends on your donor base, and not all donors are going to react and respond the same. Definitely I wouldn't say ignore any of them when they tell you you're communicating with me too much and too frequently. But we develop testing, so everything we try to do is information driven. So develop cadence testing, and then figure out, okay, what are the metrics we're going to use to measure that? Open rates, people actually picking up the call and saying, don't do that to me anymore. What kind of feedback, click-throughs, and so on, based on the number of emails you may be sending out. But also, if it's just about email, then maybe that's the problem. Maybe you really are sending too much email. But as we're talking about multi-channel, we have found that as many ways as you can get channels you can use to engage your donors, your prospects, the more options you give to communicate with them, the better the relationship is over the long term.
Bundle a bunch of
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that. And you have to look at what the percentage is too. I mean, are we talking about 30% of your donor base or it's 100 people out of 50,000, so you have to keep that in mind too. And we did have a client who one time accidentally sent direct mailing to their do not mail list. Can you guess which segment performed the best in that mailing? It was the people who said, don't mail me, and then they responded the best. So that actually became a strategy. Every 2 to 3 years, they mailed that segment. So just because remember, they're reacting emotionally too. Just because they're responding that one time saying, oh my God, you're sending me too much email, doesn't mean they never want to hear from you again either. So it comes down to testing, I think. And we mentioned DIG, which is as fundraisers, we kind of got tired of not having access to enough information. And so we said, well, we'll just build something. And so a few years ago, we built an online-based program called Donor Insight Gateway, or DIG. And it really allows us to look at trends. It looks through multiple lenses, really the drivers of donor-based value, loyalty, retention, and annual cumulative giving. And it looks through a lot of different lenses, so you can spot the trends and kind of bring it back to the monthly giving topic. It helps you identify what trends and characteristics your monthly donors portray. So that you can find more of them on your current donor base, and you know what trends and characteristics to look for in potential prospects for your monthly giving program. So I'll stop there.
I want to bring Nancy and Dr. Cuffey in two different ways, but because they're really on the ground day to day, like many of the people probably in the audience. Nancy, I know that you've experienced a lot of success at the Doe Fund prior to your current role here, and the Doe Fund being very expansive. Maybe you can kind of give some insights on how, because not only it's expansive probably in your donor segments, but also in your population. So what were some of the key components in terms of marketing and getting people to kind of buy in and support the Doe Fund, and also some of the new things that you're probably getting ready to implement in your new role at Urban Pathways might be helpful to the audience?
Great. One of the things I feel that's very strong as we're growing into the world of e-blasts, my favorite world, social media and things of the like, that at the end of the day, the most traditional communication is what's going to resonate on the macro level. So you're walking in on the blind, you really don't really have an assessment of who your key players are, but the first way to do it is I feel the most traditional way, is sending a simple letter with a real signature and seeing where it goes. And from there, I think over the years of my experience, I've learned how to and this is like a really great way to think about it, again, which is why I bring about the strategies of looking at it from a customer base, that you are in client services, you are not in fundraising, and you have to look at your clients in different segments. So you got the rocks, your major donors, your in-house list, those are your wine and dine folks. If they're on your email list, great, but that's not how we're gonna speak to them. And then you have your pebbles, and they really get everything. They're your mid-level donors. They're getting that blast, that tweet, they're seeing that instant text, they're seeing maybe a PSA, and they're getting your standard direct mail, and you're lightly touching them based on the research that you're doing. So let's hold on and let's remember those folks. And then there's this segment I call the sand. And the sand is where you really have to be a little bit more assertive than you think you are. Those are the ones I track. I like to know what my $25 and $50 donor is clicking through. So I've worked with an enormous amount of wonderful fundraisers who think like marketers and say, the $25 donor lives on East End Avenue and constantly is opening this email. Well, that's like a pop-up call. She or he may be the sand, but now all of a sudden we're looking at how do we turn the $50 donor into the $1,500 donor? Back to that middle group, and that's where the real discussion of monthly giving is before you go to jump and you do that research on those 10 donors a week, or in my case, at like the height of my craziness, 20 donors a day, is let's talk about those pebbles. They're giving to your little raffle, they respond to your gala, and they're never going to buy a $1,000 ticket, but they're constantly responding at that $20, $50, $150, maybe even during the holidays you get them at the $250 level. Bam, that's a new list. That's the folks you look to cultivate into a monthly campaign. And the way you look at it is blanket. You don't really have to take hundreds of hours to focus on it, but you decide you're going to do a virtual plate ask where we don't want you to come to our events, but we want you to participate. And from there, you move them to sort of like an ambassador circle. They're the people who best respond to your social media, to your story or testimonial, whether what your nonprofit is sort of mission is speaking to. And you test it. You test it on like 150 of them and see if they respond.
I would just like to add, I think Nancy's making a great point, and it goes back also to the data piece. I have recommended to clients, and even when been in-house, when she's talking about that sampling, create a moves management piece around that. So as much as and if you don't have the capability of creating that moves management piece, I always say invest and figure out, and one of the questions we're going to come back to is who owns the program, right? Because most of us are probably overwhelmed and things like that. But part of this being successful, and I know probably everybody on the panel will have something to say about, there has to be some ownership of the program and the work. But I just wanted to add that. But before we get to Dr. Cuffee, I am curious because I know that, as you were saying in your opening, you've been doing some very innovative oral history projects as it relates to African American women clergy. And so I wonder what importance has monthly donors in getting that work outside of even the foundations that I know have supported some of your work, fed into the success of those programs coming to completion, as well as the, because it's a niche and it's something directly that a lot of that they're interested in, how has that helped you in cultivating support?
Good, very good question. It appears that there are a lot of institutions represented here in terms of nonprofits who are well established, but do we have some of those that are growing and building like I am, Okay, but we'll have to reach out more to that sector as well when we have our next conference, because, we are also interested in building and stabilizing. What your question really draws attention to is that much of what I have been doing has really focused upon building relationships. Now, I know that that's an old theme, but it's still a good theme, because in building relationships, you also build potential donors of interest, and people can get the word out about what you're doing. And that's exactly what happened, and how the National Clergy and Laywomen Humanitarian Foundation really came into existence, is that I started with an oral history in the early, around 2004, when no one was even thinking about, once again, that clergy women population, was really marginalized in the community, but I saw potential there. I didn't think about actually a nonprofit until around maybe 2007, 2008. But as I began to value that marginalized population, not only their story, but because they were grassroots, I've always been interested in how we reach out to grassroots populations and provide service to that population. And so I saw them as being on the front line. And then, of course, in the telling of their story and the work that they were doing in the community, and also many of them, because they were ostracized by many mainline churches, actually started a nonprofit themselves or independent church with a nonprofit attached to it. So that relationship building has been important, because it brought my nonprofit into existence. And so now I'm doing a lot of things that I see you don't want me to talk about, which is actually a book came out of that. But that book is dedicated to them and to the nonprofit to do mentoring and training. So it's not for me.
I love your commercial.
Okay, No, but I wasn't trying to, I'm not trying to, I'm just saying that I understood that I had to develop a product to help support, as well as we have a small group of individuals who give monthly, and that's why the work has continued, because they are dedicated to the idea and mission of the nonprofit.
Absolutely. I think actually, Dr. Covey, I was joking, actually raised a few good points that I think we should address. One, the product line. And it was really something that Nancy was saying earlier. I used to get in trouble at work because I say programs are products. And so the program people are like, what are you talking about? This is a product. Well, your programs are products. Just because you think it's a good idea, it may not play itself out in the marketplace. But so you have to really take that time to develop products. And so what I would like us to kind of frame in connection to your point also about small startup organizations or organizations that are just beginning to think about these things or are just new in their kind of maturity stage of their development. What are some best practices that they should be thinking about in starting up a monthly donor program? Because suffice it to say, a lot of startups or smaller nonprofits sometimes are better positioned to do monthly donor programs or to start something new because you don't have all the bad habits of the older, larger nonprofits. No one likes to say that, but it's kind of true. So if you all could kind of speak to some kind of best practices that maybe small shops, and not even small shops, that we all should be looking at in really putting together programs that are connect well with our audience or our potential donors, our current donors. Mm-hmm. You want to start first, Tim?
Sure. So just a few things. One, remember that despite all the new technology and all the channels and all the different ways of giving that we have, that at the end of the day, fundraising is about relationships like it always has been. And so this is just a different type of relationship to have with your donors. So think about what's the case for support. Why should someone support your organization? It's still the foundation of any part of your program. As Dr. Cuffey was saying, that these people are committed. They want to be, and they're the SAND people too. They're doing lots of different things, and they're committed to you enough to say, yes, take money from me every month. Mm-hmm. And that's an important relationship to be sure that you're stewarding and continuing on. So best practices for a monthly donor program, a lot of them are the same best practices for your overall fundraising program. Mm-hmm. But also think of a monthly donating program along a continuum. There's a mature monthly donor program, mm-hmm. and then there's the ones that are just getting started, and then there's different steps along the way, right? So don't try to do it all at once because you heard that ASPCA has a great monthly donor program, and they do all of these different things. Get it started, do it well, be prepared to support it on the back end, and just acknowledge and steward your donors the right way so that that relationship grows. And then you can start adding the pieces like upgrading, additional giving, EFT conversion, which we'll talk about maybe later and stuff like that.
I love EFT conversion.
Okay. Well, mine is pretty basic, just following up on what Tim just said. A couple of things. One is, even though I may not be at the top end of the monthly donor program, I consider myself towards the middle. But the donors are very concerned, once again, like he said, they still want to know where the money is going. They still want communication. And I do email and newsletter. The most important thing is that I also have, I don't know whether this is important for this conversation, an accountant doing the books. So I keep those pieces together as I try to develop what we're doing.
And I want Nancy to chime in because we kind of briefly talked about the importance of donor acknowledgement and recognition that kind of enhances what Dr. Cuffey was just speaking on.
For sure. One of the things I will say is, there's sort of two sets of monthly recurring donors. If you're in a larger organization, it's some guy who gave you his visa 18 months ago and just, it's on click. And that's great, and that's like, it's sort of a self-running thing. If you're looking to start one of these, I say start off really small and do a 3-month Fund a Need campaign. That's really the best way to give your donors, hey, we're looking to expand our education front. We are looking to put 16 more computers we're looking to save 13 more cats. Like, give them something small, and definitely do it during the downtime, where you're not asking for the big appeal, where your big campaign isn't coming up, or when you're trying to promote a special event, like May, if your gala is in like October, for example. But in terms of acknowledgements, that's really your time to, and not worry about donor fatigue, but really get the most creative with your donor. So if I see a donor who's always given me a check, and for the first time went on email, boom, in 30 seconds, I'm like, my staff and I are like, this is a first time or an increased web donor, and we're gonna start responding that way. We want to start the conversation as best for them. So we had one individual who we sent out a blast email and said they liked a documentary that we had put together. So they gave us a donation for that, and we actually took one of our clients with our iPhone and had that client thank the donor, and we emailed it to them. So it's, again, I think somebody else said that today, you sort of meet your donors where they're at. If you have a donor that is an AOL address, this is not the person you're gonna be text messaging with. It's just not happening. But in a world where we're trying to move the 25 or even mid-level donor into a conversation, they have Bloomingdale's fatigue. They don't have you fatigue. Be creative with them and use the several channels that you have available to you. And acknowledgements is definitely the most creative way to do that.
I have a question for Robert, but I'm gonna get to this young lady who's standing up, but so that I don't forget the question. Nancy was making some good points, and we've talked about donors, placeholders, in a general kind of way, but I think it's also, Robert and I were talking right before we came in, and we were talking about how donors are getting so sophisticated, and it's not even a demographic that you're looking at. You're looking at this amazing kind of psychographic of what donors are like, right? So in 2010, I think anyone over the age of 66 barely kind of gave online, but now by 2014 they were giving at the same levels of people under 66. And so what I want Robert to do after this young lady's question is kind of talk about how even when how the optimization, how we're looking at these donors, and how we even set that up from a technological perspective, and how that we can't just assume that an older donor is not as technologically savvy anymore as a younger donor. My father is better on the iPad than me any day. Yeah. I want to make sure we get your question as well.
So my question is sort of along the same lines, and some of you already sort of addressed it. It's once you've gotten a monthly donor engaged, how do you keep them engaged? And I was hoping for some more specific examples. And one of them, maybe it's like maybe there's something that's automatically, if it's like a digital online contribution, maybe there's something that could be automatically generated that, continues to sort of update them about a program, or is it more like a handwritten note? I'd just love to hear more examples about the ways that you keep recurring donors engaged in the long term.
That's a good question.
I mean, to that question specifically, celebrate your wins, right? Every time your organization has something that's really great that happens for you, like, that's a great time to acknowledge your donors, because you can say, hey, we just did this awesome thing, and we did it because you guys were involved, and you guys were our rock. You guys are what we depended on while we were doing all this awesome stuff. So that's one of my favorite ways to try to do donor acknowledgement. But
another thing that we do is, in any communication that we send them, we acknowledge that they are a monthly donor. But one of the things that we do is send them a special tax receipt at the beginning of the year that just kind of says, because you're not sending them an acknowledgement after every gift now, so it's here's what you did, here's what we did with your money, and it's just reminding them that they're, even though it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, potentially to them, that their gift their monthly gift does have an impact. And so we just use little pie charts and infographics and things to just show how the gift is being used, and as a reminder to them that they are in an exclusive group and a very loyal group to our organization.
I will also add, I think arts organizations do this probably with their eyes closed, and they don't, the opposite end is they don't realize how well they do it sometimes, is invite them to things sometimes that you may take for granted. I know my last job was an advocacy organization, and like we didn't always have the kind of sexy of going to like, oh, here's some extra seats to the ballet. But if we had certain special, if we had certain special events that were, we always thought about our branding of everything I touched. How do we brand it? So I made sure we started a speaker series. I did it at the Bryant Park Hotel. Some people are like, you're doing it at the Bryant Park Hotel? Yeah. So, and a lot of those people who would come, we would give them special reserved seats, and they became donors. And those were, and I think Nancy was talking about this earlier, those people were those people who might click on here and here, there, and get on, but then we were able to start putting them into a certain set. And our program is one that was, was a 92-year organization that was still in development because we had a lot of aging donors. So I found the more we kind of invited them to certain things, because a lot of times you're having all types of events that you take for granted. We had a ribbon cutting for the new building. We invited certain people there. So it was taking stock of Evelyn, who used to be is here, and so I would drive her crazy about, okay, what are we doing? Where's the calendar, and where can we put those types of things? Because I thought that it would also help our overall fundraising and also touching our donor both in the traditional and the non-traditional way. And Tim and Nancy are also absolutely right. Making sure you get those letters of acknowledgement out almost within 5 to 7 days will make a lot of difference as well. So that's what's my 2 cents. I want to go back to Robert and what we were kind of framing earlier about how donors may be different, but are not always so different, especially as it comes to aging.
Yeah, it's funny because everybody sees that mobile is such a huge thing. Everybody's talking about emerging trends. And so, actually just last month, 55% of emails were opened on a mobile device. But just because it's on a mobile device doesn't mean that you should be making any assumptions about who's there. So I took a look at the last days of the month for, December 31st, January 30th, and February 29th, because the end of the month are big fundraising days. In our analytics, the age demographic of 65 plus was the biggest age demographic that we saw, broken out by 10-year chunks. Like that's astounding, right? Like you should not be making any assumptions. And the thing is, people will be coming to you from, an iPad, from a phone, from whatever. And so you want to try to make that experience easy for them. Just because, they're using it doesn't mean that you should be putting barriers in front of them. So something that we do to try to make that easy, like when you're typing in your address, like if you punch in your 5-digit zip code, the city and state, we're just going to look that up for you automatically. Or once you're typing in your credit card number, like everybody's phone has a camera on it. You can actually enable it so it can take a picture of your credit card and do that data entry for you if you're somebody who doesn't like typing. Even if you are typing, it's going to auto advance from the credit card number field into the expiration field, and just 4 digits, expiration, month, year, you're done instead of a couple select lists. Like we sat there and literally counted the number of times you had to tap the screen in order to make it happen. So try to see what you can do to make that experience better, but also don't assume that anybody's coming with any sort of particular abilities necessarily.
Going back to, again, the audience and startup of a monthly donor program, I would love if the panelists could speak to kind of what organizational commitment needs to be overall, not just in the fundraising department. I don't work there anymore, so I could say this. I was totally blown away when I came in with my bright idea of like, we need to start a monthly donor program seriously. And we started it, I made some investment, but the thing was figuring out who really owned that on top of all the other work that was already going on. And that really became a challenge for us organizationally. Once I kind of got everyone to invest in it, was really that ownership piece. And that was a great lesson for me as a CD as a CDO to really understand the importance of that. Once you get that buy-in, who owns it? So if we all, I mean, if everyone can kind of talk about it from the various perspectives, because when they come to Robert and Tim, they may get mad at you as vendors and say, well, we didn't know this and we didn't know that. And for Dr. Cuffey and Nancy on the ground, what is the importance of ownership of this monthly donor program as it relates to staff and an organization?
So certainly development owns it from our perspective, but like a lot of other things in your organization, you have to build bridges with other departments, right? You don't want it to be a siloed program. So communications should be involved in understanding, because it's not the easiest thing to educate people about. Well, you give us your credit card, and then every month this happens. It's not a layaway program, right? So you want to have communication involved. The programs that are benefiting from it need to be involved, and certainly IT needs to be involved, because you need to make sure on the database side that you're getting gifts processed appropriately. But development needs to own it, and it really, if you can dedicate a person or half of a person's time to managing that program, it's an important enough program. It saves you a lot of money and time and resources on retention efforts, on finding new donors, and it's good for cash flow.
Nancy?
That's a very interesting question, and for those of us who can work outside of the box and are working outside of the box, because we're not institutionalized to the extent of many of the organizations or nonprofits that are represented here. One thing I try to do is have a conference every 2 years, depending on, funding and all of that. That conference, one, is to bring again and again back those women that are loyal to this idea of the National Clergy and Lay Women Humanitarian Foundation, who want to partake of the products, which is the programming that happens during the conference. So in that sense, if I'm able to get them to come back, we do a legacy series where we give out awards to those women who have risen to the top. All of them have risen to the top, but anyway, you pick some and you give an award to, those different things maintain their loyalty to come back again and again, and I don't have the problem with lots of emails and lots of mailing, because we don't have, quote unquote, a staff. I'm basically the non-paid staff, and happy about it. And so but one of the exciting things that I'm thinking of, I have to work with a duality, in that, yes, I want those givers who give monthly to maintain loyalty to the organization, but also, I am very interested in partnering with high and low profile personalities, where I can also get that influx of money as well to be able to do some of the program objectives that's part of the mission statement of the organization. Now, I haven't done it yet, but I am moving in that direction, and partly having a stability, demonstrating stability, having a book, having conferences, and having different profile people who can validate what you've been doing helps in my move towards partnering with other high-profile people who do have money and would like to make a donation to my organization.
Okay. Nancy?
Just briefly, I feel it's a great project to give to your emerging development staff. If you're working for a nonprofit that doesn't have this glossy communications team, and you yourself are de facto communications and development, I think this is a great time to really teach and cultivate your more mid-level, junior-level development team, because it's a great practice for them. They're not talking to your major donor one-on-one, but they're the heartbeat and the tap to the things that you may not know that's going on in the city, in events, in art, in social media, and give them that project of, you're gonna manage this portfolio. And what's great about doing monthly campaigns, and I say if you're a startup, do one this summer, do it for 3 months, give them great stats, clear identifiable goals as to which you want them to donate monthly, and give it to a more thirsty development person who will have some more outside ideas and aren't funneled into the foundation major gifts world. And from my experience, that's where we saw the greatest bounce. That's where we saw the conversation, because it's a closed microphone to basically the masses. And in my experience, we've had some great feedback from it. Even from a brand raising standpoint, even oh, I used to give, $25, but I'd really like to volunteer. You'll get that kind of feedback, or get some questions that maybe you wouldn't even get from a donor at that level. So I think it's important to really cultivate and utilize every single person on that development team.
Are there any, oh, sorry. Hi.
Hi. So I have a question. Coming from a small shop, there's always weary about, so we have probably about 4,000 emails, and our communications and development team are like, try not to talk to them so much. We don't want to anger them or piss them off, and then we are gonna have, all these opt-outs. What can you say about, because you're talking about testing and really starting it up, and are there, no, don't definitely do that. You talk about best practices. How about the opposite? What should you not definitely do to avoid a lot of opt-outs, or,
In 30 seconds, you have to answer this, because I'm getting that Apollo thing.
I would just say keep telling compelling stories, right? Like, I would encourage you to cleave off a small subset and try sending them a lot of email for a couple months and see if you have a higher churn
100%.
rate. But stick with the storytelling.
Yeah, same thing. I think, as long as you're telling the same story and a consistent message across, don't be discouraged by someone saying not to do that. An exercise we like to do is lay out all the communication that I might get as a donor during the year. Take a look at that, and then how does it feel to you? What's that donor experience like from your side? So don't be swayed by someone saying, well, 15 emails is too many. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank Dr. Cuffee, Tim, Nancy, and Robert for being such great, illustrious panelists, and you all for being a great audience. Thank you.